No, really wait until the end. I may not be worth that much applause. Let's see. Well, first of all, it's lovely to be back in Boston. I lived here for a couple of years. Unfortunately, it was 10 years ago, so I'd forgotten how cold it gets this time of year. I spend about a third of my time thinking about stuff, not really working, staring out of the window. I live in a forest. About a third of my time advising people from the vendor community on how to explain things properly. And my favorite third is the time I spend with clients. And oddly enough, I spend a fair amount of time with healthcare clients, mostly doing fairly gnarly, dull, enterprise architecture-y stuff. So I'm relatively familiar with some of the challenges we've got. And I want to pick up on some of Barry's remarks, because whilst I'd like to cheer you up a bit, we're not all doomed quite, but the amount of change that's going to take place in our businesses is really that profound. It's absolutely game-changing. Do I have slides? Not that it matters, my words will paint 1,000 pictures, but awesome to see them. Now, if you need a little rest after the excitement of this morning so far, I'm going to give you the 30-second summary of my presentation. Then you can have a nap, and in the breaks you'll be able to pretend you'd watched me attentively. Essentially, I'm going to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, climbing Everest. If we get time, we will touch on ancient Chinese philosophy, and I will also talk a little bit about the distinction between the Dalai Lama and Stalin when it comes to governance. That should cover you in the break, so if you want to have a nap now, feel free to sleep, and I will get on with those of us who are capable of staying awake. You must get tired of people like me standing up on stages and saying, next year's a big year of change. Because if your career is 35 years long, you've heard that every year. This is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Dead Sea Scrolls weren't just copies of the early Gospels. There are all sorts of articles found in that little cave. And this is a Galilee Group report from AD 76. They surveyed 56 CEOs, and they all said, next year's going to be a big year of change. Change has been happening in business, in medicine, for millennia. So why should I stand up here and tell you to expect even more change next year? Well, there are a couple of reasons, and Barry touched on a number of them. Let's see if I can make this work. Back in AD 76, the time it took for a new innovation to make its way into production was about 250 years. So some clever guy invented a new way of ploughing a field. It was about 250 years before that particular technology invention made its way into general use. It took 38 years for radio to reach an audience of 50 million. It took 18 months for Facebook to find itself on 50 million mobile devices. This is an acceleration of the rate of change. We face other challenges. These are some Chinese students. In China next year, there will be more graduates in medicine and science and technology than there are in the whole of the United States and Europe combined. These kids don't do media studies when they go to university. They don't do, there is a course you can do, I can't remember which college it is, but you can do a course on daytime TV. You can do an honors degree on daytime TV. They don't do that stuff in China. They do civil engineering, medicine, biotech. This is a real and present threat to our whole lifestyles, because these people are currently living on a GDP per capita that is a fraction of the GDP per capita that we're used to. Simple economics says we can't all rise to $40,000 per person per year of GDP. Some of us are going to have to fall. And our challenge is to make sure it's not us. Good old John McCain did a sterling job in his election campaign and raised $11 million in a single month. To do that, he had to attend something like 37 dinners, which meant that on some occasions he had to have dinner twice. Which has tempted me to get into politics, to be honest, the idea of having dinner twice. Barack Obama sat on his sofa, tweeted some of his friends, and raised 55 million. This is transforming the way we choose the world's most powerful man. In Africa, how do we send money to each other in Africa? I do a lot of research. I was actually brought up in Nigeria. I do and spend a lot of time thinking and working in Africa. The kids are sending their money to each other via mobile phone, via a technology called M-Pesa. Mobile phone use in places like Kenya is about equivalent to mobile phone adoption in places like the United States and Europe. These people are really well ahead of us in terms of mobile. So when I talk about doing things smarter, there's kind of good news and there's bad news. The truth is, if there's anything I say in the next 20 minutes that really is news to you, the chances are you're in the wrong job. Because this is exciting. I think you guys are working in the most exciting sector when it comes to IT. Yours is the sector where every technology trend is going to be supremely relevant. In finance, cloud's interesting, big data's interesting, but they don't have anything like the complexity in terms of getting all of these different devices and sensors to talk to one another. You guys are in the most exciting domain of technology. And doing the really cool stuff, becoming the cloud-enabled, socially engaged enterprise is absolutely a destination you need to go to. But I'm also very aware that you've got a lot of old stuff to look after. I don't call them legacy applications. I prefer to call them cherished applications. We've got those cherished applications that live in the bowels of our systems, without which, in many cases, we wouldn't be able to function. And we can't cloudify those. We can't take those and pop them onto Amazon EC2. We've got to keep that stuff going as well. And the principal analogy I'm going to use in the next few minutes is climbing Everest. I was at a dinner a few months ago, and I was sitting next to someone who'd climbed Everest. And I asked what subsequently turned out to be a bit of a stupid question. I said, how long did it take to climb the mountain? And the answer was 4.5 years. Because he times his ascent from the moment when, perhaps not as fit as he ought to be, sitting on his sofa, he made the decision to climb Mount Everest. He was only in Nepal for 3 months, and he was only on the mountain for about 3 days. But it takes 4.5 years to climb Everest, because the truth is, and you may not believe this, but I'm not as fit as I might be. I am possibly even past my prime in terms of physical fitness. If I wanted to climb Everest, I would need to do a great deal of training. I mean, I have struggled climbing 3 flights of stairs right now. So, Everest is something I would have to aspire to, but more importantly, train for. And training for Everest isn't fun. There's not a lot of fun associated with running miles and miles on a running machine, or eating properly, or doing all of that tedious practice and exercise. And my mother always used to tell me, you don't get your dessert until you eat your greens. Well, that's what being successful in IT is fundamentally about. We have to keep reminding ourselves that there's no secret to getting fit. Eat a little less, eat more of the right stuff, do more exercise. Why is it so difficult, then? Why am I not as fit as I ought to be? There's a mental step that we all need to take. And trust me, I struggle with this mental step. My problem is, if I lose a lot of weight in a week, I buy myself a cake to celebrate, which I know is not the ideal thing. So we all know that the future of our infrastructure is this. It's cloud. I took this photograph myself. When you give a middle-aged man an expensive digital camera, he becomes some kind of artist. This took me 4 hours to take this photograph. I believe this future. I absolutely believe this future. But none of my clients can simply wave a magic wand. This is so easy to do on PowerPoint. Look, I'll make the transition. That's where we are now. Oops. That's cloud. It's really easy on PowerPoint. I've just done that for you. But most of us live with this. And for all the right reasons. We've got old scanners that output data in funky ways. I've got a client, we're spending a ton of time trying to digitize the data output that comes from various medical devices that was designed to be printed on a 40-character wide printer. And it produces beautiful printouts. But now we've got to write the software to decode what that means, digitize it, add some metadata, and make it intelligible. That's not fun. That's eating your greens. And this stuff doesn't go away. Very few of us have the luxury of throwing out medical equipment 3 years after we've bought it. I've got clients who are running medical equipment that is well over 10 years old in some cases. So we've got to live with this. And that's the challenge we all face. We've got this. This is our reality. There's no magic wand. We can't just PowerPoint this away. But we do have to embrace the kind of future that Barry was talking about. So we need to deliver a radical transformation in the way we provide healthcare services, the way we engage with customers, but we've got to keep all of this stuff running as well. Data. My favorite Donald Rumsfeld quote. I don't have many favorite Donald Rumsfeld quotes. This is the only one, in fact, that I choose to remember. But any of you who are into sort of logic would recognize that there is a fourth one missing, which is unknown knowns. And in fact, they're the problem. The known knowns are easy. You know, the stuff we know, piece of cake. The known unknowns, that's all right. That's a problem. That's something we can do research on. That's something we can go and find a solution to. Unknown unknowns, that kind of worries us because, A, we need to figure out what it is we need to know, and then we need to figure it out. The real killer for most of us is those unknown knowns, because in fact, the amount of data we already have on our patients, on our clients, if only we could just string it together and make sense of it. So that's a big challenge that we all face. I spend a lot of time worrying about feral data. Data that sloshes around your organization, living inside spreadsheets, sitting on laptops. I won't ask you the question, but when I'm talking privately with clients, I get a very consistent answer to this question. I ask them, how many of your most key strategic corporate decisions are made on the basis of data that you absolutely know to be true, to be accurate, to be reliable, and to be up to date, versus how many of those decisions are made off the back of data that's been sloshing around the enterprise for a while, has bred, has created all sorts of strange derivatives, and you know the answer. We need to figure out how to make sure that our top executives have the right data at the right time and not some horrific mutant that's been through multiple phases of washing and cleaning and exaggeration and trailing down. It's a very, very quick story. So one of my clients is a major banking organization in Asia, and they made a public statement about their corporate responsibility, particularly around carbon emissions. I subsequently met with them because I was quite impressed. And the guy said, well, listen, do you want to know how we came to that figure? It was something like a 30% improvement. He said, well, here's the email trail. And he showed me this email trail that consisted of over 30 emails. And it started with someone asking the question was, you know, what improvement have we made in our CO2 reductions? And the first answer was, I've no idea, but ask Bill. Bill's answer was, I reckon it's around 36%, 40%. It went to someone else, oh, that's a bit high. Can we make it closer to 30? The next one was, well, 30 sounds like too round a number. That'll be suspicious. Let's make it 31. And that ended up being the figure that was quoted in the regulatory required public report. Now, obviously, many of us work in industries that are even more regulated, and we wouldn't get away with that, would we? And that would never happen in healthcare, I know. And giving people dashboards is lovely, but if they fundamentally don't believe the data that they see on the dashboards, you've wasted your time and irritated your senior executives. So let's focus on eating our greens. Let's identify a couple of those key data points, make sure we can serve those up. And goodness knows, let's start by just serving them up on plain old paper, yeah? Let's get it right. Then we can put it on the iPad or on, you know, tweet it or whatever, but let's get the data right. Because if you tweet nonsense, people start to ignore what you tweet. In the good old days, we had suppliers and we had customers. 99.9% of GDP was created and consumed within a space of about a mile. I dug a turnip up, I sold it to you, maybe you gave me an axe or some pottery in exchange. Life was really simple in those days. Then it got complicated. We had partners engaged. And if you look back to the good old days of healthcare, you had a doctor, you had patients. Not too long ago, doctors made many of the medicines they prescribed. The relationship was a really, really simple one. Then we introduce hospitals, specialists, insurance companies, regulators. And before too long, we've got a complex network. And we know it's going to become more complex. We know that that's the truth. We know that not just here in the States, but across the whole of the developed world. I mean, I come from the UK, and as you know, we all live under the yoke of socialism, and we have socialized healthcare. We get to live 6 months longer than you, by the way, if you check the figures. So it can't be that bad, provided we don't get really sick. But even in the UK, there's profound pressure on the amount of money the government spends on healthcare. So we're going to be thinking and finding very, very creative ways of reducing the cost. One, for example, is to push out services into local pharmacies. So we've got to break the union that is doctors and wrest some of the control for patient care out of their hands and place it in the hands of people who aren't members of that particular closed shop union. But it's going to happen because none of us in the Western world can afford the healthcare systems we've got right now. That's just a reality, and I'm not going to bag on about how you guys pay twice as much, how the American government already spends as much money as the UK government on healthcare. I'm not going to bang on too much about that. Don't want to appear too smug, but the point is all of us have huge challenges ahead, and that's going to create massive structural changes in the industry that we serve. This is a picture of Mount Everest taken from base camp. I took this picture from someone else's website. Obviously, I've not been to Nepal yet. And it is about the journey. It's about remembering to eat your greens. And of course, occasionally, if you have a success, celebrate with dessert. But you need to focus on Facebook. You need to focus on Twitter. You need to be there, partly because whilst I have seen many cases of crowds being incredibly smart, online communities being incredibly dynamic and providing a superb resource and on occasion completely disintermediating the healthcare professionals, there's plenty of real rubbish out there. Crowds can be extraordinarily stupid as well. There are people out there selling snake oil and creating bogus communities and creating bogus beliefs and some deeply unscientific and unsmart approaches. And if you can get in there and show some leadership and embrace holistic medicine and embrace all of these alternative therapies, but be there as a leading source of accurate and honest information, you'll be at an advantage. I've already made reference to my less than perfect state of fitness. This is a comment about the kind of technologies we choose and use. If you saw me playing tennis with a wooden tennis racket and then saw me play a game with a $700 carbon fiber tennis racket, you would notice no difference. I am essentially shit at tennis, yeah? There's nothing a carbon fiber racket is going to do to make me better at tennis. Roger Federer, a chap who is undoubtedly at the top of his game and fitness, would be able to tell you precisely what impact changing from a high-tension carbon fiber racket back to a wooden racket will have on his game. But if you're rubbish at tennis, it doesn't make a difference. So let's get good at tennis. If you can't get the ball into the court with a wooden tennis racket, the chances are spending $8 million on another analytics system is not going to produce better data. So back to basics. So I've got a bunch of challenges for you, and to be honest, I mean I've looked at the agenda, and there are some amazing speakers, some really interesting speakers, but you know, You really are the heroes here, because you guys do this stuff. So I hope you get something out of all the presentations, and I hope that they can inspire you and maybe reinforce stuff that you already know. But actually, the real win for you would be if you can make two new friends in the course of the next 2 days. So an additional challenge to you is, over the course of the next 2 days, sit at a table with a bunch of people you don't know and talk to them. Make two new friends. Because if you make two new friends from different organizations and stay in touch, that will pay for this trip 10 times over. So that's one challenge. And the next challenge is embrace the dullness of some of this eating your green stuff. When you get back, don't try and boil the ocean, don't try and transformatize your data, but pick a couple of projects and kick them off. Make them short projects, less than 6 months. Don't shout about them too much, because we don't want to give ourselves too much rope to hang ourselves with, but quietly get on with it. And what you'll find is, if you can deliver a couple of really interesting little projects, the motivation within your team, below you, and the motivation from your management to support you in moving forward will increase. So find some infrastructure that you can rationalize or simplify. I know that some of the stuff we've just got to live with, some of those ancient scanners, we're not going to be able to get rid of those. But some of the stuff we can tidy up. In terms of data, identify a couple of important data points and really figure out how to present those in a totally reliable, accurate, and up-to-date way. And start thinking about how you prepare for some of the profound changes that are going to take place in your business processes. Because it's going to be exciting. Social networks are disintermediating all of those old processes we got used to. So we have to embrace that. Healthcare is going to be delivered in a profoundly different way. Pharmacists, retailers, Walmart will be checking people's blood pressure if they don't do so already. And you've got to be ready to embrace that, because if you're the organization that can embrace that change more quickly than your others, you will have a distinct and discrete competitive advantage. And the last thing I have to say to you is, enjoy the journey. The ancient, well, there's debate about whether this is an ancient Arabic or Chinese curse, but may you live in interesting times. We live in interesting times, but that doesn't need to be a curse. It can be an extremely exciting opportunity as well, and certainly I'm excited about it. Thank you very much for paying attention, and that's my Twitter, by the way, Thinkivation, so I'm hip with social too. Thank you.